Let us, for a brief moment, come out of the earth and venture into outer space. From antiquity, man has always looked up at the stars and dreamed of touring the galaxies. You sometimes feel stranded on Earth, held back by the forces of gravity, and obviously the extreme cold in space. But there is an opportunity to go into space, but most won't accept the invitation to go there. The second coming of Christ is the grand finale of all the madness and chaos on this earth. But before it takes place, a major obstacle is going to be a huge hindrance to God's people. In a letter to the church of the Thessalonians, it reads that, "Now we beseech you, brethren, by the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, and by our gathering together unto him, that ye be not soon shaken in mind, or be troubled, neither by spirit, nor by word, nor by letter, as from us, as that the day of Christ is at hand. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he, as God, sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Remember you not that when I was yet with you, I told you these things. And now you know what withholdeth, that he might be revealed in his time. For the mystery of iniquity does already work. Only he who now letteth will let, until he be taken out of the way. And then shall that wicked be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming." Here we have a brief history of the rise and fall of the system. Let us carefully analyze it so we clearly know what forces we are up against. There are a lot of things taking place in this world on the political and religious sphere, and I know sometimes it is very difficult to keep up with all the things taking place in the world. Sometimes it can make people depressed, but I pray through this study that people get a clear understanding of what's taking place in this world, and then you can review and analyze everything for yourself. God has given you a brain to research for yourself. I don't want people to get caught up into emotionalism and sensationalism. I like people so when they watch these studies that they will observe it for themselves and analyze, and then they can make a decision for themselves. So as you go through this study, I really pray and hope that it will give you a clear enlightenment and understanding of where everything is leading to. Imagine living in a country that just prides itself on its freedoms and privileges that are rooted in its laws. The first attempt and experiment to construct a nation where all men are created equal. But while you're feeling secure and safe, your liberties are carefully being stripped away from you. And you don't want to sound a false alarm in case you're labeled as a nut or a conspiracy theorist, or become a target by the invisible government. Then your shores are invaded by an entourage of dignitaries, the most expensive security operation in US history. You are told that the head of this entourage is the highest example on earth of humility, and you see him with a motorcade of Secret Service cars where he is being treated like a celebrity, a sort of rock star or the new American Idol. And you're like, is that humility? Would Jesus and the disciples, who they claim to represent, roll like that? But it is very hard for that nation to resist the pomp and ceremony of papal glamour, especially since every year they roll out the red carpet to watch mortals change into gods. And the more secular a nation becomes, the more it gives away its freedoms, especially when these celebrities are praising a system that actually hates its constitution and its Bill of Rights. According to CNN, Russell Crowe said, "I'm not Catholic and I've never felt any connection with any previous pope. But I like this guy. He's changing the tone of the way you regard the Pope, and I think it is a magnificent thing. Rupert Murdoch said Pope Francis is revitalizing church worldwide with wonderful, challenging statements and actions. Certainly make me, like others, rethink much. Chris Rock tweeted, "I might be crazy, but I got this weird feeling that the new Pope might be the greatest man alive." Bill Maher has said, "I'm not Catholic, I'm an atheist, but I like the Pope better than you do." Jane Fonda tweeted, "Gotta love the Pope. He cares about poor. Hate dogma." Viggo Mortensen said, "All in all, he seemed to me a lot more humane, more humble. He's more human than the last Pope, certainly. He's more personal, he's engaged with people when he speaks." Jon Stewart said, "Okay, that's it. I'm converting. I love this guy." Jim Carrey tweeted, "I'm not religious, Pope Francis, but I like the cut of your jib." Actor Mark Wahlberg hosted the Pope's Festival of Families in Philadelphia, where the Queen of Soul, Aretha Franklin, sang Amazing Grace in his person. And Kim Kardashian tweeted that the Pope is dope. And even the so-called highest-rated alternative media, news, praises him.
I have a confession. It makes sense given that I'm talking about the Pope. I kind of love this guy.
For those few who have still clung onto the old prophetic landmarks, those apocalyptic words just ring louder and louder, and all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him. But most of the Protestant and evangelical world have lowered their guard. Most of you probably don't know the Pentecostal Christian contemporary singer Darlene Zschech, one of the pioneers of the Hillsong Church movement. But many sing her praise and worship song, Shout to the Lord. But like Aretha Franklin, she sings that Protestant hymn, Amazing Grace, in the Vatican in the presence of Pope Francis I. What happened to Protestantism? When General Mark Clark was appointed the US ambassador to the Vatican in 1951, though there were diplomatic exchanges prior, the Times of London recorded that the Protestants of North America were enraged and attempted to boycott this liaison and unholy alliance between the two kingdoms. But then something changed. The late Pope John Paul II was welcomed with open arms into the White House in 1979 by the evangelical US President Jimmy Carter, and the landscape changed that also paved the way for his successors. A lot had changed in 2 decades when he was welcomed with a banner, Protestants for the Pope, a dynamics in cultural thinking. Then in 1994, the late Chuck Colson visited Pope John Paul II in the Vatican to strengthen stronger ties between evangelicals and the papacy. And he was followed by Billy Graham. And the most prestigious leaders of the Protestants were caving in. Even Protestants have a new prayer called Our Father and Our Mother. You have men like Bishop T.D. Jakes in the bottom center, row, who are products of the ecumenical movement to strengthen stronger ties between Protestantism and Rome. He even wears the attire of a papal cardinal while entertaining celebrities in his megachurch. And the top evangelicals in North America are making this union even tighter. Recent surveys from a magazine like Christianity Today, titled From Antichrist to Brother in Christ, shows the impact of Pope Francis I and how it has influenced the way Protestants view the papacy, though the groundwork was laid by his predecessor, Pope John Paul II. According to the Pew Research that runs along similar lines, but more in-depth in its surveys, 74% of white mainline Protestants and 60% of white evangelical Protestants say they view Pope Francis I more favorably. And that is why tax-avoiding pastors can say,
"The protest is over."
He does have a point when you look at the statistics, but is it really over? In a book titled Rome and Civil Liberty, published in 1866, Scottish historian James Aitken Wylie makes a very powerful statement that was already mentioned in a previous study. He says that the Reformation is not completed. Its work is but half accomplished. Completed the Reformation never will be till it has laid prostrate every tyrannical throne, rooted out every idolatrous church, raised every dungeon, broken every fetter, emancipated every nation and tribe that dwell beneath heaven's cope, and assembled them all in one ransomed and glorious throng before the throne of the Lamb, to join their voices in the song never again to cease upon the earth as it will never cease in heaven. Blessing and honour and glory and power be unto him that sitteth upon the throne, and unto the Lamb for ever and ever. So the protest is nowhere near over until Christ comes back. But what does the papacy really think about Protestants? In the year 2000, under the pontificate of Pope John Paul II, the papacy said, "Other churches are no sisters of ours," showing her true colours. In 2007, under his successor, Pope Benedict XVI, the same papal mantra was sounded, where the Vatican said that other Christian denominations are not true churches. And the current Pope, continuing his papal dogma, is clear that outside of the Catholic Church is no salvation. Can't these Protestants see? Are they that blinded? When the Pope entered the US Congress, he was greeted by John Boehner, the Speaker of the House, where he had his entourage of the men in black, the papal cardinals that included the papal Secretary of State and the papal ambassador to the United States. When Pope Francis entered the main hall, he was greeted with all the pomp and ceremony, and throughout his speech, he said something very, very interesting.
This means that we must be especially attentive to every type of fundamentalism, whether religious or of any other kind.
What exactly is fundamentalism? According to Virtue's English Dictionary, fundamentalism is one who believes in the literal interpretation and the infallibility of the Bible. And we shall see that fundamentalists will eventually be a target. But let's get to the root. What is Pope Francis's overall goal? Why did he visit the United States of America? Most of the media told a lie, but Time magazine surprisingly kept it real. His ultimate goal is to revive the Roman Empire and elevate the papacy as the one and only system to govern man on earth. The Roman Empire was founded by Caius Octavius, whose imperial name was Augustus, and his monarchical title, like Pharaoh, was Caesar. He was prophesied in the Bible in Daniel chapter 11 verses 20 and 21 as a raiser of taxes, and to prophetic fulfillment it was recorded with his name in Luke chapter 2 and verse 1. He inherited the Roman Republic in a will from his stepfather Julius Caesar after cutting short his military studies, and his empire covered Europe, Asia, and Africa. Roman Emperor Constantine I, also known as Constantine the Great, merged Christianity with paganism, which today we call Catholicism. And if you ever visit the Vatican, you'll see the names of popes with the title of the Caesars: Pontificus Maximus, the bridge builder. Whenever Roman emperors saluted their military, they would raise their right arm with an outstretched palm. During the Second World War, Catholic priests gave that same salute in Italy, along with dictator Benito Mussolini. The London Times newspaper recorded the famous Lateran Treaty, signed in February 1929 between the Holy See, or the Papacy, and Italy, in the Palace of the Lateran. Benito Mussolini, the Il Duce, signed it on behalf of Italy, and Cardinal Gaspari, the Papal Secretary of State, signed it on behalf of the Papal government, referred to in diplomatic protocol as the Holy See. And as they signed, their signatures are imprinted on this concordat. Gaspari's at the top, Mussolini's at the bottom. This not only gave the papacy a financial boost, but it was also an attempt to revive the Roman Empire. For Mussolini, who had a robust ego, would always parade around with a bundle of rods with an axe, called the fasces, the root word for fascism. What exactly are fasces? According to Virtue's English Dictionary, the fasces are a bundle of rods with an axe bound in along with them, anciently borne before the superior magistrates as a badge of their power over life and limb. In London's British Museum, you see the fasces worn by imperialists as a sign of their authority, and everywhere you go, you see traces of it. Outside of London's Baker Street station, you can see the fasces both on the left and on the right. In a Methodist Central Hall in London's Westminster, at its opening doors are the fasces. On the south lawn of London's National Portrait Gallery is a statue of President George Washington with the fasces. And opposite London's Houses of Parliament, there was a statue of President Abraham Lincoln, and on his chair is the fasces carved on it. And at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., the statue of Abraham Lincoln sits between two fasces. Carl Anderson is the Supreme Knight of the Knights of Columbus, where he visits Pope Francis I in the Vatican. The Knights of Columbus are the largest fraternity in the Catholic Church, who own Yankee Stadium. And what is their insignia? The fasces, the bundles of rod with an axe. Why would they choose that as their emblem? And when the Pope spoke in Congress, he addressed them alongside the two fasces. The media said he didn't really rock the boat when he spoke there, but Time magazine and its article on the Pope pushing for his Holy Roman Empire gives us the papacy's real agenda. It reads that the Pope is making the Holy See a player in the most pressing global issues in a way unseen since the early days of John Paul II. Can Francis, with no army or global financial clout, leverage his popularity in the developing world to influence the great powers, especially the US? One of the Vatican's biggest diplomatic prizes, formal relations with China. As of last December, Francis was viewed favorably by 84% of those polled in Europe, 78% in the US, and 72% in Latin America, according to the Pew Research Center. Francis is quietly alternating the established order of papal diplomacy behind the scenes. Francis' views are grounded in Catholic social teaching that sees itself above all world governments. A Roman Catholic and patriot, American Judge Andrew Napolitano, who is very skilled in legal and judicial matters, saw that the Pope's Marxist-inspired encyclical was very dangerous.
The essence of libertarianism is the primacy of the individual over the state. And as far as is conceivable, absolute freedom of the individual to make his or her own choices. That's actually also the teachings of Jesus Christ. I have come to set you free. Now, I'm in the Ayn Rand school of economics. I believe in no interference in the free market by the government. I believe the only moral commercial transactions are those that are truly and wholly and fully voluntary, not interfered with, not provoked, not even encouraged by the government. The Pope is, by his own words, a Peronist. He is probably also a communist, lowercase c, and a Marxist, uppercase m, who does believe that the government ought to control and motivate the means of production and the means of distribution.
Do you think that these opinions, given his role, can do tangible harm?
Well, of course they can do tangible harm because they encourage governments in areas where there's the open interplay of ideas to move away from the free market and towards more government control.
This judge knew that the Pope's agenda, cleverly worded under the guise of environmentalism and humanitarianism, encouraged a world government to control every resource. And as shown in the previous study, the book titled The Keys of This Blood, published in 1990, that is 25 years ago, outlines in details the papa's agenda that preceded the pontificate of Pope Francis I. Listen very carefully. The Pontifical Commission for Justice and Peace, in each of its local branches throughout the 4,000 dioceses of John Paul's Roman Catholic Church, consistently endorses the main themes of Soviet Marxist policy: the evils of capitalism in Western democracies, the call for unilateral disarmament by the Western powers, the absolute need to establish a one-world economic system based, listen very carefully, on the distribution of the riches, goods, and services of the capitalist world. At the 70th anniversary of the United Nations, the biggest gathering in history of world leaders were encouraged to follow Roman Catholic protocol, where celebrities also, without them being aware of it, followed the Vatican's plan, headed by President Obama on September 27, 2015. It was preceded by Pope Francis I on September 25, 2015, under the title of Sustainable Development.
We can be.
We must be
the first generation
to end extreme poverty.
The generation
most determined
to fight injustice
and inequalities.
The generation that saves the planet from climate change.
And this is how it will get done.
The global goals.
A 15-year plan
for everyone, everywhere.
With no one left behind.
We will live in a world
where nobody,
anywhere, lives in extreme poverty.
Where no one
goes hungry.
Where no one wakes in the morning
asking if there will be food today.
We will live in a world where no child has to die
of diseases we know how to cure.
And where proper health care
is a lifelong right for us all.
We will live in a world
where everyone
goes to school. And education gives us the knowledge
and skills
for a fulfilling life.
We will live in a world where all girls and all women have equal opportunities
to thrive and be powerful
and safe.
We cannot succeed if half the world is headed back.
We will live in a world
where all people can get clean water
and proper toilets
at home, at school, and at
work. We will live in a world where there is sustainable energy for everyone.
Heat, light, and power for the whole planet
without destroying the planet.
Good afternoon, Mr. Secretary General, fellow delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honor to be here to address the topic of sustainable development.
Los organismos financieros internacionales
the international financial agencies
por el desarrollo
sostenible
de los países y la no
The moment Pope Francis left the session, guess what song United Nations Goodwill Ambassador Shakira sang.
Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try.
Wow. Imagine there's no heaven. A fitting tune for the New World Order. Salvation without Christ. The Pope ended his geopolitical agenda in Philadelphia. Why did he announce to the world that he was going to Philly? What significance does Philadelphia have in United States history?
Pope Francis arrived at Philadelphia's Independence Hall to loud cheers. Outside the building where America's founding fathers signed the Declaration of Independence and Constitution, Francis gave his message of religious freedom.
It is a fundamental right.
And we are here to greet Pope Francis and welcome him to this place where the Declaration of Independence in this nation was really formed.
Why would a geopolitical Jesuit pope praise laws that are totally in conflict to Roman Catholic canon law? This is the famous Liberty Bell in Philadelphia, and on the top line it has Leviticus chapter 25 and verse 10 that reads, "Proclaim liberty or freedom throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof." Whether secularists want to accept it or not, US liberties, at least in its principles, are rooted in the Bible. It was Jesus who taught that tyranny upon innocent civilians was a product of secular governments that should never be exercised among God's people. But Jesus called them unto him and said, "Ye know that the princes of the Gentiles, that is, the leaders of secular governments, exercise dominion over them, that is, absolute control over life and limb. And they that are great exercise authority upon them. But Christ wants his people to be completely different when he said, 'But it shall not be so among you. But whosoever shall be great among you, that is, someone with a high position of power and influence, let him be your minister.'" The word minister is a Latin word that means to serve. Ministering means to serve others. "And whosoever will be chief among you," a chief is someone who has the highest authority in a community, "let him be your servant." Jesus also taught the clear separation of church and state. "Show me the tribute money." And they brought unto him a penny. And he saith unto them, "Whose is this image and superscription?" They say unto him, "Caesar's." Then saith he unto them, "Render therefore unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's." Caesar, who represents the state, is due what he is owed, and God is due what he requires of his people. But you don't mix politics and religion. It is a dirty, unholy alliance. And Isaac Backus, a leading US Baptist preacher and an abolitionist against African slavery, was aware of this dangerous liaison and how it was greatly affecting the colonies, and he wrote a booklet on it in 1778 titled "Government and Liberty Described and Ecclesiastical Tyranny Exposed," and because of his libertarian views, he was invited as a delegate to Philadelphia, where men were drafting together the US Constitution and the Bill of Rights to form a nation that would uphold the rights and liberties of the entire nation and not fall into the trap of the nation states in the old world. This painting shows men pulling down the statue of King George III of England, where they show this separation from the crown of England to form a new nation. But in reality, most of US laws are from England. James Madison is known as the father of the Constitution and the US Bill of Rights that was created on September the 25th, 1789. But it was modeled after the Bill of Rights of 1689, 100 years earlier. When the Roman Catholic English monarch James II of the Stuart dynasty ruled Britain with an iron fist, his tyranny was so overbearing, where Anglican bishops were jailed and Protestants were stripped of their arms. He was overthrown and he fled to France. And in 1689, the English Parliament introduced the English Bill of Rights to protect the civilian population from Roman Catholic tyranny. Many of the Protestant liberties were incorporated into the Bill of Rights in the United States. Let us compare the two. The English Bill of Rights of 1689 says that excessive bail ought not to be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. 100 years later, the US Bill of Rights reads, "Excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments." And as you can see, it is the same thing. The UK Bill of Rights says that the raising or keeping a standing army within the kingdom in time of peace, unless it be with consent of Parliament, is against law. That the subjects which are Protestants may have arms for their defence suitable for their conditions and as allowed by law. The United States Bill of Rights in the Second Amendment reads, "A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." John Milton, the 17th century English poet, who was the Secretary of State for the Commonwealth of England, inherited the freedoms of the Protestant Reformation and became one of the earliest advocates for free speech in his tract in 1644 titled Areopagitica, a speech of John Milton for the liberty of unlicensed printing for the Parliament of England. But the struggle did not end there. Bunhill Fields burial ground in London was a cemetery built for English radicals. One of them is John Bunyan, and though from outside of London in Bedford, he is buried in London. Famous for the book Pilgrim's Progress, this nonconformist Baptist preacher and writer was arrested and jailed for having a separate Bible study outside of the main Church of England. He would have been released after 3 months, but refusing to give up his preaching or his free speech, he remained in jail for 12 years. Daniel Defoe may not be well known, but he was a famous nonconformist. Many may consider him as a plethora of contradictions, for while he condemned the Spanish Inquisition for its brutalities, he justified English colonialism subduing natives in his famous book titled Robinson Crusoe. But for his outspoken pamphlets, he was put in the pillory and humiliated, then sent to prison. Just a number of years prior, the Houses of Parliament incorporated free speech, which is one of the pillars of modern liberties, in the Bill of Rights of 1689. That the freedom of speech and debates or proceeding in Parliament ought not to be impeached or questioned in any court or place out of Parliament. And that for redress of all grievances and for the amending, strengthening and preserving of the laws, Parliament ought to be held frequently. 100 years afterwards, portions of the same language is used, such as free speech and redress of grievances. The First Amendment reads, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances." In England, monuments are erected in memorial of one of the foundations of English freedoms, the Magna Carta, or People's Charter. And though the English are oblivious to their own history, in London's Parliament Square is a monument to that great English law that gives us trial by jury. James Aitken Wiley knew how important that monument was to British freedoms. The great principle conceded so early as the days of King John in Magna Charta, afterwards confirmed in the reign of Charles II in the famous Act of Habeas Corpus, and held by all statesmen who have flourished since to be one of the main foundations of British liberty, namely the inviolability of the subject save by the authority of law. This is why the Magna Carta monument in Runnymede, England, was presented as a gift by the American Bar Association, because though the US claims it is separated from England, it still incorporates its laws as their laws, and the 5th and 6th Amendment of the Bill of Rights incorporates the Magna Carta, trial by jury. The mayor of Philadelphia went to the Vatican and gave Pope Francis I the Bell of Liberty. But has anyone actually compared the US Constitution and the Bill of Rights with Roman Catholic canon law? Let us put them to the test. The Constitution of the United States says in Section 1, "All legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and House of Representatives." Canon 332 reads, "The Roman Pontiff acquires full and supreme power in the Church when, together with episcopal consecration, he has been lawfully elected and has accepted the election. Accordingly, if he already has the episcopal character, he receives this power from the moment he accepts election to the supreme pontificate. If he does not have the episcopal character, he is immediately to be ordained bishop." In the Constitution of the United States, in Section 4, it reads, "The United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government, and shall protect each of them against invasion, and on application of the legislator or of the executive when the legislator cannot be convened against domestic violence." Canon 331 reads, "The office uniquely committed by the Lord to Peter, the first of the apostles, and to be transmitted to his successors, abides in the Bishop of the Church of Rome. He is the head of the College of Bishops, the Vicar of Christ, and the pastor of the universal church here on earth. Consequently, by virtue of his office, he has supreme, full, immediate, and universal ordinary power in the church, and he can always freely exercise this power." Amendment 1 reads, in the Bill of Rights, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances." Canon 752 says, "While the assent of faith is not required, a religious submission of intellect and will is to be given to any doctrine which either the Supreme Pontiff or the College of Bishops, exercising their authentic magisterium, declare upon a matter of faith or morals, even though they do not intend to proclaim that doctrine by definitive act. Christ's faithful are therefore to ensure that they avoid whatever does not accord with that doctrine." According to Amendment 11 in the Bill of Rights, it reads that the judicial power of the United States shall not be construed to extend to any suit in law or equity, commenced or prosecuted against one of the United States by citizens of another state or by citizens or subjects of any foreign state. Canon 747.2 reads, "The Church has the right always and everywhere to proclaim moral principles, even in respect of the social order, and to make judgments about any human matter insofar as this is required by fundamental human rights or the salvation of souls." Canon 1405.1 reads, "The Roman Pontiff alone has the right to judge heads of state." According to the Fifth Amendment in the Bill of Rights, it says, "No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on the presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia, when in actual service in time of war or public danger. Nor shall any person be subject for the same offence to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property, without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation." According to Canon 1311, the Church has its own inherent right to constrain with penal sanctions Christ's faithful. Canon 1312 reads, "The penal sanctions in the Church are, number 1, medicinal penalties or censures which are listed in Canon 1331 to 1333. Number 2, the law may determine other expiatory penalties which deprive a member of Christ faithful of some spiritual or temporal good and are consistent with the Church's supernatural purpose." Canon 1336 reads, "Expiatory penalties can affect the offender either forever or for a determinate or an intermediate period. Apart from others which the law may perhaps establish, these penalties are as follows: a prohibition against residence or an order to reside in a certain place or territory." As you can see, the law that governs the papal bureaucratic government and the law that governs the civilians of the United States clash with one another. And if the papacy wants to reign supreme, those laws of the United States have to be repudiated. And as the papacy sees the entire world as her own real estate to govern, for her to bring all government in line, the world order has to be cleverly engineered and brought in line with the papal government. I would like to challenge you. Let us take a look at the Inquisition and the 21st century global war on terror. It was Pope Innocent III, the Prince of Darkness, who spearheaded the Inquisition, and it was overseen by Dominic, the founder of the Dominicans, and that reign of terror was to overtake Europe, where the angelic doctor Thomas Aquinas was one of its strongest advocates of its brutality, and it was later run by Ignatius de Loyola, who founded the Jesuits. Many think that the Inquisition is a relic of a bygone age, but as the London Guardian newspaper tells us in 2006, the Inquisition, its 600-year-long campaign across Europe against heresy, formally ended only 40 years ago. Modern books on the Inquisition are very scant. The Catholic Church covers her tracks very well, but there is one book titled In Spanish Prisons by Major Arthur Griffiths. Let us go through this book very carefully and compare its methods to the methods in the War on Terror. It reads that independence of thought was deemed opposition to authority and resistance to the universal supremacy of the Church. Hollywood always gives us a heads up about the future. And the London Guardian cited the Hunger Games, The Giver, and Divergent as films that attempt to crush independent thinking.
We've created a society in which each faction plays a critical role in maintaining the social order. And it is up to all of us to take a stand against its one true enemy, divergence.
I know you're angry, but you're letting it consume you.
You are living proof the divergent problem has grown beyond all control.
Throughout this great nation, never have we been more unified. Because now more than ever, Pan Am is speaking with one voice. The capital and the districts bound together in solidarity.
From great suffering came a solution. Communities.
Injected.
Serene, beautiful places where disorder became harmony. When people have the freedom to choose, they choose wrong.
When the papacy ruled supreme in Western Europe, she burnt out any trace of dissent, whether it be literature or people. She even created a database of forbidden literature that was a threat to the Catholic Church, and it was rumored that one of the forbidden books was the Bible. The Reformation came. It wasn't perfect. It had to unwind years and years of apostasy. But one gift it handed down to us besides the Bible was free speech. And in 1948-49, in Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it reads that everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. This right includes freedom to hold opinions without interference, and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers. But that privilege has been under severe assault in the global war on terror. The Trans-Pacific Partnership is little known to your average individual, but its secret meetings were exposed by WikiLeaks, where one of its goals that was published in the London Guardian newspaper is to clamp down on internet freedom. In the UK, it is like they are trying to put all free speech on lockdown. Sir Peter Farhi, the Chief Constable of the Greater Manchester Police, said that the government's extremist laws are very damaging to the country. He spoke to the London Guardian, where it documented that this anti-extremism drive damages both free speech and religious freedom, and could marginalize and destroy relations with different communities. But it gets worse. British journalism is under major attack of its free speech, where Tim Luckhurst, Professor of Journalism at the University of Kent, wrote in the Mail on Sunday and said that here in the UK, we face the prospect of a state-sanctioned regulator, backed by Royal Charter, exercising ultimate control over what we can read in our newspapers. And if it takes effect in November 2015, it will impose the most severe restrictions on the freedom of the press in any advanced democracy. Wow, ain't that the Inquisition? Based upon a poisonous trap left in the 2012 Leveson report by English judge Sir Brian Henry Leveson, British journalism is now in a panic. Once envied all over the world for the 300-year-old tradition of free speech in the press, it may now face severe draconian state-controlled restrictions that can seriously limit what is shared to the public. Is it me, or is that a very slow spiral back into the Dark Ages? The article continues to say that I pray that instead of allowing the toxic legacy of Leveson to damage freedom of expression, Parliament will install legal protection for newspapers in, for example, a new British Bill of Rights. If they do not, Britain risks being humiliated internationally. And it is making many irate, where they are even trying to vet what is being aired on TV so it doesn't incite extremism. They are passing law after law, and they do not even know how to really define extremism. but they are trying to clamp down hard on religious figures, where they will all have to be on a national register or database, they say, to counteract extremism. Both the terror and religious hatred law in 2006 is vague in its language, but both assert that if you are saying, distributing or broadcasting something offensive, you can be arrested for terrorism, where you can be incarcerated for up to 7 years. It is interesting that one of the offenses is quoting from the Bible. Deep. In the United States, there is a similar inquisitor pattern. The Department of Homeland Security and the FBI produced a document in 2009 titled Right-Wing Extremism, and on page 4 they gave one of the definitions of extremism. It reads that anti-government conspiracy theories, and in quotes, end times prophecies could motivate extremist individuals. So people who study end time prophecies are under the close radar of the global war on terrorism. And how do they plan to deal with them? At a lecture titled The Center for Asymmetric Warfare at the Jesuit Georgetown University School of Foreign Service, Thomas T.X. Hames, who specializes in counterinsurgency warfare, tells us how.
External actors have to be eliminated. These guys who are coming in are the most dangerous of all because they're true believers. And true believers, whether they're Muslim, they're Christian, or they're Marine, are dangerous people because there is no other way other than their way. And you've got to eliminate them.
Interesting. Let us look at another aspect of the Inquisition. Good Catholics were commanded by edicts published from the pulpits of all churches to give information against every person they knew or suspected of being guilty of heresy, and priests were ordered to withhold absolution from anyone who hesitated to speak, even when the suspected person was a near relation, parent, child, husband, or wife. So a surveillance state where everyone becomes a spy. Many people are fascinated with films on British intelligence. The Bond films are a glamorization of MI6, with its violence and fast car chases, and a little leak into how the covert world of intelligence works. Spooks shows the state surveillance of Britain's MI5, and espionage, once very secret, like every other political event, is now becoming entertaining. But let us separate fact from fiction. The head of Britain's MI5, like the Inquisition, encourages Muslims to spy on each other as an intelligence asset for the state. The former head of MI5, Dame Stella Rimington, also encourages every civilian in the UK to be a spy for the state. The former head of MI5, Dame Stella Rimington, invoked the wartime spirit as she said that the public had a duty to act as the eyes and ears of the security services in combating terrorists. Both Britain and the United States, both once the vanguards of liberty, have tiptoed into being the most surveillance states on Earth.
With one of the world's highest levels of surveillance,
we are tiptoeing towards a totalitarian state.
Is it possible to live under the radar in the UK?
We have no freedom. I want to see what it's like out of the system.
Over 28 days,
we've got to move quick. Let's get these people.
14 ordinary people go on the run.
Within all of us, there's an instinct to chase or be chased.
And try to evade capture by a team of expert hunters.
No matter how clever a fugitive is, they make mistakes.
We have eyes absolutely everywhere.
I don't like the way people are looking at me.
We will find him. Do you understand?
The real-life thriller, Hunted, starts the 10th of September on 4.
Do not leave bags unattended.
Maybe you see something suspicious, but you don't want to get involved. It's nothing, you think. Can you be sure? If you see something, say something. Report suspicious activity to local authorities.
At the close of the United Nations 70th anniversary, a meeting was chaired by President Obama in the center on how to combat violent extremism.
Governments cannot do it alone. We need to engage all of society, religious leaders, women leaders, leaders in the arts, music, and sports.
Many Muslims saw it as a target against their community, but we have to look at the wider application. After the meeting, U.S. Attorney General Loretta Lynch made a keynote address for the United States Department of Justice for a scheme and a plan called the Strong Cities Network to strengthen community resilience against violent extremism and how it will work. On the official website, it reads, "Cities are vital partners in international efforts to build social cohesion and resilience to violent extremism. Its main objective is to build a community of cities to inspire local action on a global scale. The Strong Cities Network will serve as a vital tool to strengthen capacity building and improve collaboration," said Attorney General Loretta E. Lynch. "As we continue to counter a range of domestic and global terror threats, this innovative platform will enable cities to learn from one another, to develop best practices, and to build social cohesion and community resilience here at home and around the world. This global network is designed to build on community-based approaches. The Strong Cities Network will enable cities across the globe pool our resources, knowledge, and best practices together, and thus leave us standing stronger in the fight against one of the greatest threats to modern society. It will be run by the Institute for Strategic Dialogue, a leading international think and do tank with a long-standing track record of working to prevent extremism." This is the official website for the Institute for Strategic Dialogue, and its headquarters is based in 48 Charles Street, which is a 10-minute walk from London's Green Park Station. So by connecting all the cities around the world together to work as a global connective unit, you create a global spy network on the same lines as the Inquisition. We are all in some way, shape or form connected into the digital world, and it also operates on the same lines as the Inquisition, a form of surveillance on innocent people all over the world. We were kind of forewarned about this already by two English Etonian-educated writers. One was Eric Blair, who wrote under the pseudonym of George Orwell in a book called 1984 that was published in 1949, where we have exhausted the now household name from his book, Big Brother. And Alexander Leonard Huxley, whose 1931 dystopian novel, A Brave New World, also gives us a picture of how the future will look like. Building on from this, Polish-American Jesuit-educated Catholic Marxist Zbigniew Brzezinski, probably the most influential geopolitician in the world, wrote a book titled Between Two Ages in 1970, foretelling us how the world will be integrated. The United States has been most active in the promotion of a global communication system by means of satellites, and it is pioneering the development of a worldwide information grid. For the first time in history, the cumulative knowledge of mankind will be made accessible on a global scale, and it will be almost instantaneously available in response to demand. But this cumulative knowledge means that even if you're an innocent civilian or even a politician in power, your personal details can be exposed to the public by the invisible government. Whether you're running for the president, such as Hillary Clinton, whose personal emails were leaked, or Sir Malcolm Rifkind, who was the chair of the British Intelligence and Security Committee and had to step down for getting involved in a money scandal which he denies. And that it is known that some of the highest officials in both England and the United States are surveillance, so that if they have any dirt on them, they can be manipulated if they ever step out of line.
In the terrestrial side, on especially telephones, that NSA were targeting individuals. In that case, they were judges like the Supreme Court. I held in my hand Judge Alito's targeting information for his phones and his staff and his family. At that time, there was a senator who I didn't know who he was, a guy named Barack Obama, because he just won his primary, and he apparently had a good speech for the Democratic Convention. And there were multiple high-level individuals. General Petraeus was another who I saw.
Well, we have 3 primary intelligence agencies in the UK. MI5 is where I used to work, and that's the UK Domestic Security Service. I have to say, looking at the shredding of all our civil liberties in both the US and the UK since 9/11, what we're looking at now is a de facto police state. All the laws are in place, they're just not being applied to most citizens yet. And the stuff we saw going wrong included files on government ministers, which of course is a problem because it goes back to they have information that can then be used to pressure the ministers. Illegal phone taps.
Edward Snowden, a former NSA whistleblower, leaked to the world classified documents and verified as an insider what many people already suspected. But a lot of the information he shared, the government already made us aware of it.
Minority Report.
Okay, Jad, what's coming?
Double homicide, 1 male, 1 female. Killer's male, white, 40s.
Set up a perimeter and tell them we're en route. I'm placing you under arrest for the future murder of Sarah Marks. Give the man his hat.
The future can be seen.
We are arresting individuals who have broken no law.
But they will.
The fact that you prevented it from happening doesn't change the fact that it was going to happen.
The system can't be wrong.
British intelligence has been running a secret mass surveillance program that tracks people's internet browsing around the world. It's emerged from new documents leaked by whistleblower Edward Snowden. The program's codenamed Karma Police, and it analyses web users' online habits by tracking which websites they visit. It also logs which radio stations they listen to, and it traces them on social media and their search history. Then it puts all this data together and cross-checks it to build a web profile of individuals and to identify suspicious activities.
Nosy Smurf is the hot miking tool. So for example, if it's in your pocket, they can turn the microphone on and listen to everything that's going on around you.
Unethical, dangerous. You've turned every cell phone in Gotham into a microphone.
And a high-frequency generator receiver.
In 2008, the film The Dark Knight was indirectly foretelling us that all over the world, civilians' cell mobile phones are being monitored by the government. But even 10 years before that, 2 films came out in 1998 also foretelling us about surveillance that includes CCTV cameras, voice recognition, and your internet browsing.
Coming to you now from the largest studio ever constructed, it's The Truman Show!
Yeah! Good morning!
Good morning!
Oh, and in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
What if?
No scripts, no cue cards.
Morning, Spencer. How's it going?
What if you were watched every moment of your life?
How many cameras you got there in that town?
5,000.
The surveillance footage is coming in right now from Pratt.
Freeze it and process it for face recognition.
The government's been in bed with the entire telecommunications industry since the 40s. They've infected everything. They can get into your bank statements, your computer files, your email, listen to your phone calls.
My wife's been saying that for years.
Every wire, every airwave. The more technology you use, easier it is for them to keep tabs on you. It's a brave new world out there.
Glenn Greenwald is an American lawyer, journalist, and author. And as you scroll through his website, glenngreenwald.net, there are excerpts of his book, No Place to Hide, in PDF format that gives you an insight of his meeting with Edward Snowden. This information is free, and you clearly see how the government has a digital record of literally everything we do. There are pages upon pages of documents, and if you carefully go through them, you'll be like, there is absolutely no privacy. Your smartphones are like tracking devices, so even when you are traveling, they know where you are. They have a record of all your conversations in a so-called backdoor database on your phones, as well as a record of all your browsing history. And what about social media? Did you really think that was private? Not at all. Recent evidence has shown that Western intelligence mines information from social network sites so that they can monitor every iota of your life, kind of like the Catholic confessional booth. Bloomberg Business reports that when you are identified in a picture on Facebook, biometric software remembers your face so it can be tagged in other photographs. And what is very annoying is that people take photos and they put it online on their Facebook pages without asking people's permission first. That is why I very rarely take photos, because people are too naive to how the New World Order works. When you look at your Facebook page and you see on the side friends you may know, you're like, how do they know I know all these people? The metadata logs all of your friends on your phone, and your emails and their contacts are also being mined. Did you really think all these free apps you downloaded, including WhatsApp, didn't come with a price? Tony Bunyan is categorized as the 50th most influential person in Europe, for he really campaigns about civil liberties. And he wrote a book in 2009, The Shape of Things to Come, a few years before the Snowden revelations. And quoting from the 2007 Portuguese European Council presidency, it reads that every object the individual uses, every transaction they make, and almost everywhere they go will create a detailed digital record. So everything we do is stored on a database to keep a record of every civilian on the planet who is connected into the digital world. And when you travel on public transport, it is logged. And even modern cars can be tracked by satellites. But what makes it worse is that if you give that same power to civilians, they do the exact same thing. People are enraged about drones and they're killing and spying on civilians. But once you give civilians a drone, instead of using it for some panoramic film shot for a documentary, they use it to spy on other people. All over the world, but especially in the UK and the United States, there are CCTV cameras to monitor the population. 1/4 are in the UK alone. And WikiLeaks exposed that the CIA uses Trapwire as a front organization to monitor face recognition of the public in the United States as they are walking by. But like the Inquisition, we use our smartphones to film everything. And when incidents occur in public, instead of us helping someone who is in need, we take out our cameras, film, and then post it online instead of helping someone who is actually in need or is dying in front of us. So we have become a part of the global surveillance system. But there are also hackers. And from doing a bit of my own research, there are people who even hack into their own family and friends' personal details. What the government does on a macro level, civilians do it on a micro level. Here's a bit of advice. When you're using any of these electronic devices in the public, that is your phone, your tablet, your computer or laptop, or a Kindle, try to keep your information private. If you're scrolling through your phone on the train or bus, keep your phone quite near to your face so the person next to you cannot see your details and tries to collect data. If you lend somebody your phone to make a call, stand near to them, for if they take your IP address, they will tap into your personal details, and believe me, people are doing it. Even when you walk into a church, your phone should be off anyway. Turn off your Bluetooth, for not everyone who smiles and says, "Yes, Jesus loves me," is necessarily of God. This is not to make you paranoid, but just making you a bit more alert and wise. It's just advice. There are a lot of lovely people out there in this world, but there are also some very dangerous ones. The surveillance state modeled after the Inquisition is not just the government, it is also civilians. I know many may feel uncomfortable hearing this information and feel, why doesn't the government just leave us alone? If you are a student of prophecy, you know that if they want to impose a global decree, the mark of the beast, the image of the beast, and the number of his name on the entire earth, where no man might buy or sell, then you have to have a fairly good foreknowledge of who will bend and who will stand. And if you have ever sat down and studied the volumes of works that covers world history, there is always one consistent concurrent theme. Man just wants to control man. Why? Because it gives him more power when he knows that he has some kind of political or religious or psychological control over another. And the men in the highest positions are clear that they take the office for fame and power.
I mean, look, 8 years was awesome. And, you know, I was famous and I was powerful, and but I have no desire for fame and power anymore.
You know, let me tell you, this is a fun job.
Right.
Every day I wake up and I get a bird's eye view on what's going on everywhere in the world. Mm-hmm. I can have as much of an impact on the things that are important to people as anybody on the planet.
Right. All the praise that belongs to God, the Pope takes for himself. You can say that he technically doesn't call himself God, but he's sure treated as the supreme deity. And the very titles of the Godhead, the Holy Father and the Chief Shepherd, the Pope ascribes to himself. That is why he qualifies for that dynastic rule in the prophecies, the man of sin and the Antichrist. And just as Revelation chapter 20 and verse 11 describes God as sitting on a white throne, the Pope also sits on a great white throne between two cherubims, just like God. This is the highest level of blasphemy. For according to Psalms chapter 80 and verse 1, Psalms chapter 99 and verse 1, Hebrews chapter 9 verses 5 and 6, and Revelation chapter 11 and verse 19, this is how God's throne is described. Let us look at another aspect of the Inquisition. The prisons of the Inquisition fall under two great heads. The secret prisons in which those awaiting trial were confined, around the penitential prisons where sentences were served. The secret prisons, however, have most fired the imagination. A man might disappear from his accustomed haunts, and for years his family and friends be ignorant of his condition or even of his very existence, until one day he might appear at an auto de fe.
Excuse me, Mr. Amra El Ibrahim?
Yes?
Sir, we have an emergency message for you.
What is it? Is this my wife? Is she all right?
Where is he? I don't know.
For a year, NSA has been tracking calls from your guy, El Ibrahim.
CIA calls it rendition. Basically, the government has authorized the transfer of anyone they think might be a terrorist to prisons outside of the U.S.
Prison.
Guantanamo Bay in Cuba, the first U.S. overseas airbase turned prison, is one of many prisons all over the world that houses Muslims who have been kidnapped all over the planet. And like the Inquisition, the family either hears that they are in one of these prisons or hears nothing at all. The best book that documents this frightening experience is called Ghost Plane by Stephen Gray, that details all the world allies of the CIA's rendition program that included Egypt, Jordan, Syria, and leaked documents from the invasion of Libya shows that Britain's MI6 and Colonel Gaddafi's intelligence were working together as a unit until he came out of favor with them. Though many see the war on terror as an attack on Islam, governments from across the Islamic world colluded with the West and were bankrolled on the CIA's payroll that also included 1/4 of the countries all over the world, where many of these countries are now being exposed for having secret prisons to have alleged suspects, and this shows that the Inquisition has not died. And as we come to the close of this study, we will take one last look at the Inquisition. An appeal to torture was had if the prisoner persisted in denying his guilt in the face of plausible testimony, or if he confessed only partially to the charges against him, or if he refused to name some accomplices. The auto de fe, the act of faith, was a humiliating act where men were stripped naked and wore a cone-shaped hat with demons on it. Women were also stripped naked and had their bare breasts squeezed and burnt, or was given the pear of anguish that was forced into their genitals. The lever was pulled and it opened up, leaving excruciating pain. People were also forced to sit on spiked chairs with their hands and their feet chained. Men had their knuckles and fingers in a thumbscrew that also caused excruciating pain. And this is how the papacy dealt with so-called heresy. And with such a dark record, you would think that the papacy would have some regrets. Not at all. The Catholic Herald, dated to the 3rd of February 2006, said that the Spanish Inquisition was legally justified. If she is justifying the past, she'll do it over again. Waterboarding was one of the worst forms of torture, where they would put a nozzle over your mouth and force water down into it that was designed to some way collapse and waterlog your lungs. And many demonstrators against it in its modern use are clear that it is from the Papal Inquisition, where it is being used today against Muslims, which has been proven to be unnecessary and unethical.
It was one of the truly sad moments of American history that the Bush administration chose to respond to the serious security threat posed by the September 11 terrorist attacks by resorting to torture. Things like waterboarding, mock execution by way of drowning, are blatantly illegal under both domestic and international law. President Obama could have said, no, this is clear illegality. We're going to prosecute this illegality. We're going to make clear that it should never happen again. But by choosing to move on, to forget about the past, not to prosecute this serious crime, Obama is keeping torture as a misguided, wrongful policy option for some future American president.
Both the UK and the US intelligence agencies used torture to extract information. And Abu Ghraib in Iraq, which is now closed down, also used interrogation and torture to humiliate Iraqi civilians. It is not nice, and this has only fueled recruitment, especially when Hollywood has spent a great portion of the 21st century financing the glamorization of torture through the power of enticing celluloid imagery. That is not only a clever recruitment drive to not only enlist young men and women into the military, but to condition the public that torture is justified, and also gives an opportunity in the panic of hysteria for the United States to amend its own laws.
Today, with the invocation of the War Powers Act by the President, I am declaring a state of martial law in this city. We intend to seal off this borough.
Do you have any idea what you're starting here?
It's wrong. What if what they really want is for us to herd children in the stadiums like we're doing? And put soldiers on the street and have Americans looking over their shoulders? Bend the law, shred the Constitution just a little bit.
The House of Representatives 1540, better known as the National Defense Authorization Act of 2012, does away with one of the key pillars of the US Constitution, habeas corpus, trial by jury, that gives the president all power to use the armed forces for a military tribunal, where an individual can be transferred to their country of origin to face such trials, which is in section 1021 C1. Detention under the law of war without trial until the end of the hostilities authorized by the Authorization for Use of Military Force, which has been stressed upon by a top military brass, General Wesley Clark.
So if these people are radicalized and they don't support the United States and they're disloyal to the United States as a matter of principle, fine, that's their right. It's our right and our obligation to segregate them from the normal community for the duration of the conflict. And I think we're going to have to increasingly get tough on this, not only in the United States, but our allied nations like Britain and Germany and France are going to have to look at their domestic law procedures.
The Magna Carta, once repealed and done away with, will lead the Protestant nations of Britain and the United States back into the Dark Ages. And J.A. Wiley knew that if you do away with the Magna Carta, a protection against individuals' liberties, then it is game over. He has a section in his book, Roman Civil Liberty, called Canon Law versus British Law, or a battle for Magna Carta. And this is what he says. Every man who puts himself under canon law throws off the authority of the British law and places himself, body and soul, under a foreign domination. The Pope then, according to canon law, and even according to the admission of recent jurists, is the temporal as well as spiritual chief of the world. Canon law, then, though based on a great religious dogma, namely the vicarship of the Roman Pontiff, is mainly a civil and political code. The prerogatives it claims are of a civil and temporal kind, namely supreme jurisdiction over persons and lands. On the 29th of October 2004, these Eurocrats in this room on the Capitoline Hill in Rome signed the Constitutional Treaty for Europe, the same room where the Treaty of Rome was signed in 1957. And at the far end is a bronze statue of Pope Innocent X, overseeing these Europhiles. And underneath this statue, former British Prime Minister Tony Blair on the left and Jack Straw on the right signed away for Britain. But what were they actually signing? Your average person in Europe, including in Britain, has probably never heard of the European arrest warrant. But it is a constant heated discussion among politicians, for its very essence clashes with British law that upholds habeas corpus that is rooted in the Magna Carta, trial by jury. And if it is imposed, that means another law coming from Europe will override British law. The late British politician and MEP Philip Bradbourne said in the Times of London in 2008 that the European Union law that will try Britons in their absence in foreign courts is against habeas corpus. But where did that EU law actually come from? It came from Roman Catholic canon law. And this is what Canon 1412 says. A person accused in a penal case can, even though absent, be brought to trial before the tribunal of the place in which the offence was committed. It is fair to say that all roads lead to Rome. But how does the papacy intend to bring every religion, corporation, secret society and political structure under its control? Well, as the prophetic clock is winding down, we will just have to wait and see.